Hey, have you ever struggled with wondering how good of a programmer you really are? You look out online at all these other people that seem to have it figured out, and all these assessment tests we take and what your employer thinks you should or shouldn't know, and start to stress out about it. Well, today I want to talk to you about whether that's even a realistic thing to try to figure out, and some of the things I've learned over the years, and hopefully that'll help you take a little bit of the stress off yourself. So why do we care if we're really a good programmer or not? Well, the first reason that's pretty obvious is if we have a job and we're trying to make a living, we need to feel that the people we're working with can count on us, depend on us, and think we can pull the job off. The second reason we often want to know how good of a programmer am I is we're honestly just comparing ourselves to other people. And this is the big problem I want to talk a little bit about today. We're either on the job and we're comparing ourselves to other developers on the job, or we're going out on LinkedIn and on social media and we're looking around and we're trying to figure out how good of a programmer am I compared to all these other people who may or may not be being honest about their skills. So if you try to figure out how good of a programmer are you, there's three different ways that we often go about this. The first way is we'll try to get some sort of skills assessment. As you know, now there's the algorithm crunching sites that a lot of people unfortunately are forced to do today. But ultimately, I personally believe skills assessments, though they can make you feel like you are a good programmer, I've never seen one that's really comprehensive enough to cover all the things that I would consider making someone a good programmer. And so if you are taking those, and let's say you don't do real well on a skills assessment for some reason, be a little bit careful, personal opinion, in kind of putting too much stock in the result of that assessment. Those are just assessing a limited set of some aspect of computer science or development or, agile processes, whatever you're testing for. And it shouldn't really be a true reflection that you consider of how good you are as a programmer. The second way we'll often try to figure out if we're doing a good job or if we're a good programmer is we'll look at our accomplishments. I would often review over my career at the different projects I've been on. What did I produce? Was I creating output for the company? Did I build things that were, complicated? Had I written elegant code? Did my other coworkers think I did a good job? And really just trying to evaluate, myself, how good I thought I was doing. And as this video goes on, I want to talk to you about why I think that's actually not possible, but I think it's only natural that that's usually where we start. And the third way we often try to figure out, am I a good programmer, is by asking other people. Really, it's sometimes a good idea to just get out of your own head, find some people you trust, and ask them. Just straight up, what do you think I'm doing good at? Where do you think I need help? Sure, we often, if we have let's say a full-time job, we'll have, performance reviews, but, actually seeking out somebody who you look up to that's maybe not even your manager, and just having an open conversation with them, really showing that you want to improve and asking how you're doing, can give you a lot of good information. Now, again, I don't think that's suitable on its own, but that's one area where we can kind of try to get an idea of how good of a programmer we are. So why can't you know whether you're a good programmer or not? You see the title of the video, and it's a little bit prodding at you, but this is really what I believe. It's pretty much impossible to truly know if you're a good programmer. And there's two major aspects to the reason why I believe this is the case. The first one is, I don't think we can really have a standard definition of what makes a good programmer. Now, I'm sure I'll get some comments about this. We could split some hairs about, well, if we're purely talking about programming, and you go get a degree or you go to a boot camp, here's the various cognitive things they're going to test you on. And, here's the different skills you're going to need to know and language features or maybe architecture, all these different things. But personally, I think what makes someone a good programmer actually involves a lot of other skills, things like openness. How open are you to other people and their ideas being different than you? If you aren't open, you're not going to be a very good programmer, especially on a team, because you're not going to learn. Also, things like just being motivated and always continuously teaching yourself new stuff and looking for opportunities to learn. Sometimes I see people who get into our industry, they let's say, crank through college or a boot camp. They get in the door, they're working in the industry for 3 to 5 years, and they get tired of it because they never really had a desire to solve problems and to grow and learn all the things that it takes to really be good at this job. At some companies, and I've talked about this in other videos, you might be needing to know how to test the code, how to document the code that you build, how to write wiki topics. You might be asked to help with like user story definition, if you're doing like a Scrum or Kanban type of process or something like that. But there's pretty much an endless number of things that can make us a good programmer. And I think one thing that can start to take stress off you if you're starting to worry about it, I hear people concerned about imposter syndrome. I did do a video earlier in the channel a while ago about that. Imposter syndrome, it being a real thing, the psychology community has actually come up with this term, but I think a lot of times in software development, we call ourselves imposters, or we say we feel like we're feeling imposter syndrome, and we're not. We just don't have a clear assessment of how good we are. So with all that being said, being able to agree with what a good programmer even is something that I think we can stress ourselves out a lot about, and it can actually help you relax quite a bit if you just let go of that. So the second reason why I don't think we can really know if we're a good developer or not is because I think we don't really have a clear picture of ourselves. You may have heard of this concept of the Dunning-Kruger Effect. I stumbled upon this 6 to 8 years ago. I was going through a period in my career where, and this might be something that's similar to what you've went through, I got into the industry. I was working for 3 to 5 years. I talked about in my last video how my first software project was tons of drama, but I got a big promotion to an architect at that point. Very much went to my head. And I thought I was a really good developer. I was leading a team. I was doing all kinds of architectural stuff. So my own assessment was that my skills were honestly much higher than they were. But eventually, as I got into consulting, and the longer I did this, I started to realize I actually was not that good of a programmer. And there were a lot of things I did not know. And eventually I got to a place where I became really depressed because I thought, all these years, I've thought I was understanding what I'm doing, and really there's so much I don't know. And I started to feel incredibly overwhelmed with expecting myself to know a lot of stuff that I couldn't figure out time wise. How was I even going to have enough time to learn all these things? It just seemed like there was like an endless number of new technologies and processes and problems on my project. And the idea of knowing how to deal with all that and being able to grapple with it just became crippling. And eventually I got to a point where I realized that actually is the wisdom. That is the experience, is getting to that point in our industry where you finally realize you can't know everything. You just can't. And so when I talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and you may have heard of this already, it's really just a chart. There were a couple gentlemen that did a study years ago that came up with this concept, but it's basically a chart where along the x-axis is time. So, let's say from the beginning of your career to the end, it could be any duration of time. And the y-axis is your confidence. So it's basically your own feeling of how good you are at something. And obviously in the context of this video, it's about how good you are at programming. But what's interesting about this kind of phenomenon they discovered is that basically it shows that people tend to think they're more competent in something than they really are. But depending on how you look at the chart and the way they've measured the data, it also can show that there's people who are extremely intelligent, but they actually think they're less intelligent than they are. And why I think this is really, honestly, super helpful effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect, for you to understand and look into. Read the Wikipedia article on it. It's really good. I'll put a link in the description. If you were to look at my career, for example, when I started out, I was going to college, I was learning some things. I felt like, okay, I'm learning a few things. I'm going up this chart, this initial slope that they show of gaining confidence in the Dunning-Kruger effect. And then I got a job and I learned some new things. And then I got, promoted and I learned some more things. And then I got promoted again. And then I did another project and I just kind of ascending this whole time, thinking, building more confidence, thinking I know more and more about software development. And suddenly I kind of got to the peak and started to question some things and started to run into some situations I'd never run into before and started to freak out a little bit. And that began the slow decline of descending, where my confidence started going down and down and down and down and down and down and down until eventually I was at this just pit, feeling like, man, I don't really know anything. And then I slowly started to come back out of it. And that was where I really felt like, okay, I've been doing this long enough that now I'm finally starting to get it where I think, okay, maybe I am a decent programmer. Maybe I can do software development to a decent level. So the reason I explain this to you is, first of all, to help take some stress off you. Look, your career is a long period of time. Don't put the expectation on yourself that by even 3, 5, 10 years in, you got this. That's going to stress you out. It's pretty commonly known that the majority of developers are still in, it's kind of like the 21 to 35 age. But realistically, I think many of the best developers I've met, not all, they're people who are probably 10 plus years, some of them even 20 into their career. Now, I've talked about in other videos why I think age and number of years of experience is a bad indicator of how good someone is. You can have people that have, worked a really long time and they just haven't grown. But honestly, it just takes a lot of time and hours and effort and, sweat equity to put into software development and into the industry to really start to get truly good at it in the way that we need to work to be successful with other people, not just, to pass coding tests or whatever. But the second reason why I think it's really important for you to understand this is something that I think a lot of people just don't really think about, which is that really that same Dunning-Kruger Effect chart that I just showed you, there's multiple of those for every skill that you have around software development. So for example, you might go through a completely different curve over your career that starts at a different time, that changes at a different time, that ends at a different time for, let's say, modeling things in databases, and then a completely different timeline of that Dunning-Kruger effect for learning your programming language or a different programming language, or, for example, leading people. But the reason I bring this up is just, again, if you're working with other developers, let's say you meet somebody and you're like, wow, they're really good at this one aspect of code. Remember, there's a whole bunch of other things that they probably are not good at. So if you're trying to base how good of a developer you are based off of just this limited view of one skill of a person, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because there's probably a lot of things that you're further along at than them. So I hope that helps a little bit today. I do find I and many other people that come to me for career coaching, I think we just beat ourselves up psychologically in the back of our minds, expecting ourselves to know way too much. And I hope that just if you go look into the Dunning-Kruger effect, read up on it, think about your own career, think about some of the things I've told you, maybe it'll help you have a little less anxiety around your own career and your skills. Next time, I want to give you a little bit of an inside peek to my career coaching business. There are 6 main things that people keep coming to me for over and over and over again. And I've started to kind of shift the way I'm offering coaching now, specifically to help them with those outcomes. I think why it'd be cool to share this with you a little bit is just there's probably a fairly decent chance that you may have had one of those 6 things over some time in your career that you've tried to figure out. And maybe if you hear a little bit about what other developers are going through, it'll help you feel a little bit better if you feel like maybe one of those areas you're still struggling in, because honestly, myself included, we all are. So until next time, thanks for watching.